Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the Leadership Development Office radio show and podcast. This is the Leadership in Practice radio show where we're tapping into our colleagues' experience in leading in our organization. So my name is Matthew Painter. I'm the Director of Leadership Development, and I will be your host along with my very esteemed and capable co-host, Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura Heider, and I'm a Senior Consultant for Leadership Development in the Leadership Development Office. And we are very excited to be talking about performance management today, specifically managing individual performance with the illustrious Jordan DeMoss. And can you give us a little introduction, tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, thank you for that kind introduction. My name is Jordan DeMoss, and I've been at UAB now for about 15 years. I currently serve as a Vice President of Clinical Operations and get to work with psychiatry, rehab, our laboratories, respiratory care, and the cancer service line. I've gotten to work in a number of different places at UAB over my career. I've worked at Highlands, I've worked in the corporate office, and then I've been here on the main campus at UAB Hospital for about 10 years. So I've loved every moment of it. I tell people all the time, there's never a day, as crazy as it might sound, that I don't enjoy and look forward to coming to work here. So it's a real privilege to work at UAB.
Wow, thanks, Jordan. We obviously have a lot of experience to tap into. So one of our favorite questions that we ask our guests is, what are some of your leadership lessons learned? What are those nuggets of wisdom that you can share with our audience?
I have lots of them. I usually look at leadership lessons very much just like life lessons. They kind of go along with parenting lessons I've learned probably. One is listening. It's a fairly basic one. It's one I think we all struggle with a lot, is to just be quiet and listen and understand, seek to understand, not forming the judgment so quickly, but really looking at different perspectives. And perspectives are so important in healthcare, because I tell people all the time, we have such a diverse group of people, not just socioeconomically, racially, but also diverse from their skill sets. And it's important to really seek to understand where everyone is coming from and how it all comes together. I think I was sharing with you all before it started. I think as a leader, you have to be ready to say, I don't know. That really goes back to listening and understanding as well. I think sometimes you think as a leader that people are coming to you to give answers. And I find that I'm usually a better leader when I ask questions and really seek to support and to help find answers, but not necessarily have them from the outset. You have to be ready to fail. I think as a leader, again, we try to protect ourselves and we worry about failure as a weakness. I think failure is a strength in many ways. I know it's strengthened me through my career, as hard as it is. I always learn from my failures, and I tend to come out stronger. And I think you have to know that as a leader that sometimes it'll be lonely. And I don't tell people that to be scared or to say that we live a bad life as a leader. We don't. But you do have to be ready to make decisions that aren't always going to be popular. But stand by them because you believe they're the right thing to do. And so I've always said, as long as I'm making the right decisions for the right reasons, I'll be able to wake up the next day and feel good about myself, even if it's not the popular decision.
Those are great nuggets of wisdom, Jordan. Thank you for sharing those. As you know, today's topic is around performance management, and that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. It can mean just metrics of financial metrics. It can mean clinical metrics. It can mean talent metrics. We want to hear your thoughts on what performance management means to you and how you approach it.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think performance management does mean different things in different contexts. I think first and foremost, you can't talk about managing performance without talking about really developing and empowering people. So I'm always quick to reflect on performance management in regards to how well I'm actually doing as a leader in supporting and developing the folks that I'm supposed to be managing. I don't really like that term, but managing, if you will. So I think, I always look at development first. I'm glad that we focus a lot on that at UAB because it is so important. But it's really not fair to manage performance without, really developing people. So I think it starts there. I think it starts in giving everyone a fair chance to be developed and to be their best potential. And then as far as managing performance, it really goes to setting expectations. I truly believe that most people, when given expectations and shared expectations, not my expectations, but our expectations, that they rise to the occasion of their potential. And I don't think people really have to be managed as much as we think they do. I think it's more about development, support, and creating a work environment where people want to be their best.
So that you raise a very interesting point about developing people. Can you talk a little bit more about how you go about developing your team members and the people that you work with?
Sure. So, you know, I think it goes back to that thing about asking questions. You know, I think we tend to think we know where people want to go. And sometimes if we don't ask, they don't tell us. And so I think it's important that we always make sure with our leaders and with our frontline staff that we know where they want to be and where they want to go. That doesn't mean that, you know, suddenly tomorrow they get there. But I think it's important to understand their goals so that I can be a better leader and do a better job of helping them navigate how to get there. I think I probably too often make the assumption that they are where they want to be, and maybe that's not true. You know, maybe it's that they are doing something today that they would prefer not to be doing a year from now. So developing really starts by asking questions and then by connecting them to the right resources that are offered. I think it's important for me to know what we offer at UAB, which is a lot, and to really encourage people to take the time to do that. And for me, this is the hardest part, to create the space for them to do that. That means me not asking them to take on that extra thing if I also want them to develop and spend time doing so. This is probably an area I don't do a great job at, so I think it's I don't want to come across as if I've got this figured out. But I do think that it really takes talking with people and understanding where their goals are and then supporting them to get there, even if it's in a selfish way not the best thing for me, because they may be a really great performer for me, but we always want to support people to where they want to go.
So in that line of thinking, I know Laura and I talk to a lot of folks about delegation, and I try to calibrate people's attitude towards that more as a form of talent development or developing their people. Is that your attitude towards it? I mean, how do you approach delegation, for example?
I think delegation is an excellent way to develop people. And I don't think that delegation means giving someone something to do and then standing over their shoulders. Again, I think it means supporting, being there, being supportive when they need you, not necessarily when you think they need you. I don't do a good job of delegating. I think sometimes I can be a little bit controlling in my own right. I like things done a certain way. I believe there's a right way to load a dishwasher, and only I know how to do it. So I think, I'm afraid I can approach work like that too sometimes. But I think delegation has to come with a level of being confident in your own leadership and in yourself to be able to give up that control. And so I think that's something I'm always working on myself. But I definitely believe that delegation empowers people and helps them be better than where they were.
Love so many of the things that you're saying about the things you're being so honest about your struggles and the things that pose difficulties for you. I think that a lot of times leaders encounter a difficulty with being vulnerable or being transparent. How do you conquer the impulse to pretend that you know everything, or to present yourself as being the knower in the room? Or how do you conquer dysfunctional impulses and maintain that sense of vulnerability and transparency and growth?
I think it's like a lot of things in life. I think you have to fail and experience things, so that's why I like failure, because I think it leads to growth. I think that the number one thing for me, and I've always said this about talking in front of a group of people, is that we're all just people. I mean, we're all just people, and it's that whole we all get up in the morning, we all have our routines. We're all just people. And so I just don't see leaders as being some, this group of elite people that are different than anyone else. We're just in a role, again, to really empower, to support, and we fail too, and we don't know the answers. And I think it's important to tell people that. And so I always approach, even in hard situations, even when I was talking about being disagreed with or making decisions, when I've had to make hard decisions and people disagree, I always let them know that's okay, and that's not part of me, thinking that I was right, because I may not be right, but it's just the decision we made. And so I think it's just a part of kind of understanding yourself and being comfortable with getting through saying, I don't know, or I'm sorry, or I'm wrong, and I think we have to do that. Again, it's kind of like your life lessons. It's like what you do with your family and your friends and all the other things that help you kind of move through hard parts of your life. I see leadership as no different.
So we've talked about a lot of different topics already that are really good. So I remember you mentioned setting expectations. We've talked about talent development, delegation, and so forth. But in the course of managing, quote unquote, leading your team, there comes a time where you have to have conversations with them that may not be pleasant, like you're saying. How do you operationalize that, or what's your approach to it? How do you try to create that, managing performance conversation?
Yeah, I do think it goes back to setting expectations. I think you do have to measure. So, there are measurable results. We're all held to meeting certain performance goals. I think those conversations, though, always should start with that level of inquiry and really seeking to understand why. Not seeking to understand that it's a poor leader, or that it's a person who doesn't have the ability, but understanding why we didn't meet the performance, and starting there. And then if there isn't a why, if it is performance, if there are performance issues, I think you have to address them, and I think you have to be very clear with why you're addressing them, what's not happening correctly, and what you expect to change. I think we all tend to sometimes beat around the bush and not give really clarity around what the individual isn't doing that's fulfilling the expectation. And so I think it's very important to do that. But most importantly, not to wait to do it until it gets to the point where it's too late or where it's a performance review. We were talking as a senior leadership team the other day about annual performance reviews, and this year about how we're going to relax our requirement given how much is going on and the stress and everyone trying to manage through COVID. And so that's kind of a little small gift, not to ask everyone to do an annual performance evaluation this year, because it is a lot of work, especially for leaders at the front line. But we were saying that doesn't mean that we're not going to continue to give feedback, and a performance evaluation shouldn't be that time when you tell someone they're not really doing their job. So I think ongoing feedback is important, and delivering it, though, first and foremost in a way that's inquisitive and not punitive, or not blaming, or not threatening.
So Jordan, you have obviously a lot of experience doing just that. Do you have any stories that you can share that might be a good win, or maybe a challenging conversation that you had?
Gosh, I won't share any specifics, but I've had individuals cry when you give performance feedback, and a lot of times, it wasn't because I'm not a mean person, but I was giving direct feedback. And when you really talk to folks, it was because no one had ever given them feedback, and so in their minds, it was being mean, it was being critical, it was being non-supportive, and I think you have to just continue to tell folks and reassure them in your own actions. It's not about criticism, but it's really about and I always say this, it's my perspective. It's how I view it. It's not right or wrong. It's just how I view that performance and where I believe we need to go. So I do think it's hard sometimes. Sometimes it's not fun. And so I think it's just something you have to work on. You have to practice it a little bit, I think. And the biggest thing is just taking that step and actually doing it. We've all dreaded that conversation before. And it never gets easier. It's never like, it's not like I get excited to give people hard feedback. It's never fun. But I think it's necessary.
So in the course of pursuing ongoing growth for the people that you're working with and trying to help hold them accountable, do you have occasion to do coaching? Is that something that you do with your team members? And if so, how do you approach it?
I probably do a very poor job of coaching. I don't think I don't do it in a probably a really kind of coaching way, I guess. I don't take the time that I need to. So I'm probably not a good example of a good coach. I do make myself very available to listen and to be present when they need me for, if there's something that they need to talk about, or they're having, difficult day or a difficult challenge. They always know, the folks that I work with always know they can reach me anytime. And so, so from that perspective, I probably coach through difficult situations, but I don't know that I proactively do a lot of kind of mentoring and coaching. And I know that's something I probably need to be more intentional about.
So do you yourself, did you have a mentor?
I don't have a mentor, and I've always kind of felt bad about that. I feel like you need to tell that story of that grand person that really shaped your life. And I've never had that. And so, I don't want to lie about it and say that I did. But I do think that, if you're open and you're observant, which I've always been really observant of other people, I think you pick up on a lot of things that you see that you like and that you don't like. And so I think I've always just observed a lot of folks in different roles, not necessarily traditional leadership roles. And I think through my life I've just picked up the different things that have kind of molded my perspectives on what makes you a good leader, or what makes you a good friend, what makes you a good dad, what makes you a good person. And I've never had anyone that's really been my mentor. And, I'm always a little conflicted about mentors. Somebody saying, I had the mentor, because I think we all have perspectives, and one perspective is never enough. And so I do worry a little bit about this kind of, passing along things, and maybe not giving people an open enough mind to think about diversity of thought, if that mentor has too much influence in one's life.
So it sounds like you maybe had like a host of mentors who might not have even known they were mentoring you.
I think that's a really fair statement. I think that's true. I think people have probably had snippets of kind of changing and molding who I am, and I may not have ever told them, which is probably shame on me,
I would love to hear some things that you observed, or any wisdom that you gleaned from the people you were observing.
Yeah, I think, one thing that you always, as a leader, as you're developing, look for, and it's because something I still have to work on, are people who can really stand in difficult times and really control themselves and be collected and be able to move through that kind of noise. And so, I've known leaders throughout my career who you just really admire to see them in difficult situations, whether it's people being critical, people yelling, people being just outright obstinate, and seeing just the way that they have handled it. And what you really come to find out about a lot of those folks is that it really goes back to their own kind of self-development and realization that, sometimes it's the little tricks that we learn, but, it's just, you have to be kind of silence your own mind sometimes and realize that people are coming at things from different ways. And so I've always tried to remember, especially in healthcare, that you never know the burdens that people are facing. And so perhaps those actions weren't about you. And I think we always want to attack. I know I do sometimes. I just want to attack back, and then I'm like, maybe that really wasn't about me. Maybe that's just that person, not really, having a bad day or having something going on in their lives that I don't know about. So it's kind of back to kind of appreciating where people are coming from. So I think just observing the different behaviors of people in difficult situations have always been something I'm kind of fascinated by, and continue to learn from.
So I'm curious to know, like, when Laura and I obviously talk about these types of things with managers all the time, And one of the things we talk about in performance management is this idea of having one-on-ones, structured, regular meetings with folks. I'm just curious to know how you approach that. And then on the flip side of that, like your approach to visibility and what does that mean in performance management?
Yeah, I'm probably going to give a bad answer on this one. So, I think I've tried many times to have structured meetings where we really have, outcomes and metrics and, these things that are, almost checklist like. And, that's never worked for me. And I think part of it is that, I work with, folks who are so accomplished and so talented that, it kind of goes without saying that the things that I'm asking about, they've accomplished or they're doing or they're moving towards. That's not to say that we don't look at performance metrics, we do. But really my one-on-one time really is back to, more of the questions, the inquisitive, understanding what's keeping them up. What do I need to be doing for them? Where do we need to be going as a department? So, I think I've always had more unstructured one-on-one meetings, but I do still have one-on-one meetings. So that is something I do. We do that every month. And I forgot the second part of your question.
Well, I want to piggyback off of that just one second. That is, it sounds to me like you're actually having one-on-ones, but you keep them inquisitive and open dialogue, right? So I think that's still a win, and that's something that we would encourage from a performance management perspective, is doing what you're doing.
Yep.
So you're understanding what works best for you, which is good, and your team, because you have to know your audience as well. Right. The second piece was just visibility, and how does that play into performance management?
Well, visibility, if I'm understanding your question, is one of my, I always tell people that's where I would spend all of my time if I could. And it's probably one of the biggest disappointments that I have every year when I write in my own self-eval, disappointments. It's that it seems as you grow within the organization from a leadership perspective and take on more responsibility, the visibility, at least the way I like to think about visibility, is being with people, being at the front line, listening, connecting with people. And I used to do a much better job of that and have more time to do that. And I just, perhaps the criticism is maybe I still have the time and I'm not prioritizing it the way I should. So, I think it's incredibly important for a leader to be visible. Certainly COVID has challenged what that means. It makes it even harder to go. Sometimes I don't feel responsible just showing up on a unit and being visible the way I did in the past. But from an intentional perspective, I do still schedule time with my leaders for us as a team to go out every month and spend time with frontline, just again, listening, hearing, letting them know we care, thanking them, being appreciative of the work they do. And I think visibility is something that people really do want from leaders. And I think it connects back to the thing I said earlier. I think they just want to know that we're just people like them, which we are.
That's absolutely fantastic. So if someone wanted to follow the same career path that you had chosen, they want to get into leadership, and they want to start working as someone who manages other people, what advice would you give them?
Well, I always tell people, when they think about leadership, first and foremost, do it because it is a passion of being a leader and somebody who wants to work, in developing other people, empowering other people, and not for a title. A lot of times, and this really comes with folks coming out of graduate school. I get this question all the time. What's your 5-year plan? And when did you know you wanted to be in this role? And how did you get there? And I always tell them, I don't know. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And I think it's incredibly important to do what's purposeful for you right in front of you. And so, I always tell them, don't chase a title, but chase what's your passion? And if it's to be a leader, then don't worry about the title and follow really what you want to do, and to make sure that it's always purposeful work for you. So I think it's important that people identify what their goals are. I do think that's important. Don't chase a title, find something that's really purposeful work for you. And then just work hard and be kind and be open and, you know, I don't know. You know, I don't have all these fancy answers that I think people always want. I've never interviewed for a job other than when I started here as a administrative resident, you know, and I just kind of, you know, worked hard. And when people said, all right, we want you to go do this, I'd say, okay, you know, and I think it's important to say that, you know, every job I've had here hasn't been awesome, but I think you learn from it all. You know, it's the proverbial no job too big, too small. So I've always kind of taken that as my approach.
That's tremendous. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, there's one last thing I'm curious about, and that is succession planning, which is kind of a funny segue from what you just talked about. And it's not so much about, you know, what's next for Jordan, but so much as how do you approach it? And so when we're talking about in the Leadership Development Office, it's also a form of talent development, making sure that that your department is going to be successful with or without any one individual. So do you have thoughts on that?
I do, you know, and I do think succession planning should be intentional and thoughtful. I do think you have to be careful not to continue to promote, again, it's kind of back to that mentoring thing, one train of thought. If in fact you choose people that are like you and you don't see other people who may be interested. So I don't think of succession planning as much as, you know, who's going to be in Jordan's role next, but I think of it in terms of understanding where people want to be and helping them think about roles that might fit that passion for them. And then letting the organization know about it. I mean, I think as a leader, that's one of our jobs, is to say, hey, we've got this person over here that's really awesome. And if you have something coming up in a new leadership role or one that's coming open, consider her, consider her for that role, because she's, got the XYZ skill sets that I think would really lend itself well. So I think succession planning is more about looking at the broader picture of what's out there and knowing your people versus saying, the next VP of clinical operations is going to be X. I think that's actually can be detrimental sometimes to an organization.
Absolutely. So that's great. That's exactly what our philosophy is as well. So thank you for sharing that. Laura, is there anything else we need to hear from Jordan?
No, that was fantastic. I jotted down some notes. It was very helpful. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it, and I hope it gave a little insight into at least my thoughts. Again, they're not right or wrong, just my perspective. So
absolutely. And we're very much happy to tap into your experience, Jordan. So thanks again, and thank you all for listening and tuning in to our Leadership in Practice radio show.